Hey guys, this is Ms.A, and in this video we are going to be choosing the most accurate and relevant supporting details for a set of given claims. So our learning target is to choose most accurate and relevant supporting details for claims, and in order to achieve that learning target, we've got 4 criteria for success. First, we have to be able to identify a text-based claim. Second, we have to be able to distinguish between evidence, facts, and text-based claims. Third, we have to be able to find evidence to support a claim. And finally, we have to be able to determine which evidence is the strongest support for a claim. All right, so first, what is an evidence-based claim? Well, basically, a claim is a clearly stated inference or conclusion that comes from the close reading of a text. So when you're claiming something, it's really your argument, your opinion, a conclusion that you've drawn based on evidence. So on the right side of the screen, there is a short passage about what caffeine does to your body. In the passage, I see that it talks about how the problem is that most Americans drink too much coffee, and this can cause health problems. And it talks about the caffeine that's located in the drink. And they say that although it's okay to have some caffeine, kids and teens drink an average of more than 64 gallons of soda with caffeine a year. So if they're saying that Americans drink too much, and then they give the specific number of 64 gallons must be an excessive amount. So what claim can I make based on this evidence? Well, I can argue that drinking coffee is something that should only be done once in a while. And I'm really going to use as my evidence the fact that we're drinking too much of it. All right, another way that we can make a claim is we can make it based off of fictional stories. It doesn't just have to be nonfiction like the coffee passage. So at the beginning of the school year, we read a story called The Chaser by John Collier. If I go back into that story and I look at some of the details of things that happen, I know that one major event is that Alan goes to a potion shop to buy a love potion. I also know that a significant detail is that he's in love with Diana, but she doesn't love him back, and that Alan plans to give the love potion to Diana. Based on this evidence, what is a claim that I can make, a conclusion I can draw? All right, well, if Alan is going to use a love potion, and I know that using a love potion is basically forcing someone to love you, and he's planning to give it to Diana because she doesn't love him, what type of person is Alan? The author doesn't have to come right out and tell me. I can draw the conclusion that Alan is a desperate person. I might also make the argument that he is obsessed, because only an obsessed person would use a love potion to win the love of the person that does not love them back. So these are both claims that I can make based on the evidence. An effective claim usually contains 3 features. It should state a conclusion that you have come to after reading a text and that you want others to think about. So back to my previous slide, this is a conclusion I made after reading The Chaser. Nowhere in the story is Alan referred to as desperate. That is my conclusion based on the evidence. It's what I want others to think about Alan. It's my opinion. It's based upon and linked to the ideas and details of the text you have read. Again, that's how I came up with my claim for The Chaser. And it demonstrates knowledge of and sound thinking about a text or topic that matters to you and others. It's not as though I looked at the text and I made a wild conclusion like Alan has never been in love before, or a conclusion like Alan is planning to use the love potion on every woman he ever falls in love with. Those are all really extreme conclusions. They're not necessarily logical or using sound thinking. All right, so now claims, once again, they have to make an argument or draw an inference from the text. So when you're making an argument, you're sharing an opinion, a point that you want to make. And when you're making an inference, you're reading between the lines. You're drawing a conclusion based on the evidence that's there. Now, textual claims cannot just be statements about what a text tells us directly. That would just be literal comprehension. So if I read The Hunger Games and then I tried to claim that Katniss Everdeen ends up winning The Hunger Games, that's not really a claim. That's a fact from the story. In fact, if you think about it, I know it's not a claim, because a claim you should be able to prove with some kind of text evidence, and the text evidence should not be the exact same thing as your claim. So really, what evidence am I going to give that Katniss has won the Hunger Games. My evidence is going to be Katniss winning the Hunger Games. It's the exact same thing. If your claim and your evidence is the same, then there's a problem. It means that your claim is your text evidence, or you are not using the correct text evidence. Maybe there's another piece of text evidence that'd be a little bit different that could back up my claim. So when something like that happens, you really want to try to look a little bit broader, a little bit more general. Based on that evidence, what's an argument that you could make or an inference that you could make? So on the other hand, a stronger claim would be something where I am drawing a conclusion based on the fact that Katniss has won the Hunger Games. So again, claims can be simple conclusions that we draw about the text. So based on the fact that she won and the way that she won, I could claim that Katniss Everdeen is a canny and fierce competitor. And then I can support that with evidence because she manages to beat the careers who have trained for years to be professional Hunger Game competitors. The fact that she's able to do that can help me prove how canny she is and how fierce she is. Some text-based claims can also be more complex and they can require more evidence. Sometimes, like the example on the screen, they require evidence from more than one text or from more than one section of a text. So if I wanted to make the claim that the author, Suzanne Collins, presents Katniss Everdeen as a girl who is forced to kill others to survive but also protects others, in order to support and prove that claim, I would first, for the first part, she's forced to kill, I would need to use evidence from the section where Katniss kills her opponents during the actual games. And then here, where I want to claim that she protects others, so she's a protective person, I would need evidence from the beginning when she volunteers for Prim. So this is an example of a more complex claim where I would have to use multiple pieces of evidence, not just one part of the text. All right, so for the last few slides, we've really been talking about ourselves as readers making claims. Now, when we're reading a text, an author can also make a claim within a text and then support it with details. So the same way we're making a claim based on evidence, authors of nonfiction texts are going to make claims based on their research, and then they're going to present those claims to us in their writing. It's up to us to figure out where the author is making a claim and which details they're using to support it. In fact, if we go back to the passage from earlier in the lesson, the passage about what caffeine does to you, we can actually see an example of the author making a claim and then supporting it with evidence. In fact, the author's claim is the evidence I used to make my claim. It's right here where I underlined where the author said that most Americans drink too much caffeine and this can cause health problems. That is the author's opinion or their argument. And the author is making this claim based on research and evidence that he has done. Now, the author supports it in the next sentence when he talks about 64 gallons of soda, and then later on in the article, there's other pieces of evidence. Now, for the author, that is their conclusion. Now, me as the reader, I'm going to make my own conclusion based on the author's claim and the author's pieces of evidence. All right, so we're going to apply what we've learned about claims and evidence, and we're going to practice it with a passage from the 2013 New York State ELA exam for 6th graders. It's a passage called Snow Way. Snow Way by Beth Geiger. Where will you find the world's best spot for stargazing? Many astronomers would say the South Pole. The sky is always clear there, and during winter it's always dark. Astronomers flock to the South Pole, as do scientists who study climate, the atmosphere, and polar ice. To accommodate them, the U.S. National Science Foundation, NSF, built an outpost called the Amundsen-Scott South Pole Station. Getting people and supplies to the station is not easy. Military transport planes do it when weather permits. Therefore, the NSF is building a highway to the pole. The project is one of the most unusual road construction projects ever undertaken. Top of the bottom. The Antarctic Highway, called the South Pole Traverse, will not be a typical thoroughfare. Everyone knows what a road looks like, says Peter West, an NSF spokesman. What we are working on is not that at all, by any stretch of the imagination. When completed, the traverse will be a 1,600 kilometer, 1,000-mile path of groomed snow and ice marked by green flags. It will cross floating ice, gaping crevices, cracks in the ice, deep snow, treacherous mountains, and frozen nothingness. The traverse is not a typical road because Antarctica is not a typical continent. Ice, 4,570 meters, 15,000 feet thick in some places, covers 98% of the continent. Antarctica is the world's coldest desert and receives only about 5 centimeters, 2 inches of precipitation, rain or snow annually. The thick ice is the buildup of millions of years' worth of snowfall. A few high peaks in the Transantarctic mountains poke through the ice to form islands of rock called nunataks. East of the Transantarctic chain is the Polar Plateau, the flat top of the bottom of the world. On the plateau lies the Amundsen-Scott Station. Antarctica's ice doesn't stop at the edge of the continent. Thick slabs of floating, slowly shifting ice called ice shelves fringe the continent. The biggest, the Ross Ice Shelf, is the size of France and is hundreds of feet thick. Ice route. The traverse begins at McMurdo Station, the main U.S. base on the continent. From there, it heads across the Ross Ice Shelf. Floating, shifting ice might seem like dangerous ground for heavy truck traffic. Why not go straight over the land instead? Traveling across the Ross Ice Shelf keeps the journey at the relative warmth of sea level for as long as possible. At higher elevations on land, temperatures can get so cold that they cause machinery to malfunction. The shelf also makes for relatively easy cruising. It's really smooth and flat, said Erin Pettit, a University of Washington geologist who works in Antarctica. Frigid summers. Building the traverse has been a daunting job. A hardy 5-man crew works only during the Antarctic summer, December to March. Even then, temperatures remain well below freezing. At first, it's strange for anybody to work in the cold like that, said project manager John Wright, but you learn to deal. The first summer, the crew members tackled their most chilling challenge, yawning crevices in the Ross Ice Shelf that can swallow a tractor in the blink of a frozen eyelash. The crevices, which can be 30 meters, 100 feet deep, might not be so dangerous if they were visible, but most of them lurk under covers of snow called snow bridges. Many people have fallen through snow bridges to icy deaths. The nastiest crevices on the route are in a shear zone, about 48 kilometers, 30 miles from McMurdo. There, ice within the shelf moves at different rates, stretching and cracking into a maze of crevices. To cross that area safely, the team members probed the ice ahead with radar. Whenever they found a crevice, they used a bulldozer to fill it in with snow. Then they inched across. During the last construction phase, the crew worked for 66 straight days. After filling crevices in the shear zone, the team bogged down in a 260-kilometer, 160-mile stretch of deep snow on the shelf. The biggest surprise, remembers Wright, was any good day. We had 2 last year, he said. All right, now that we've read the passage, we're going to look at some of the author's claims and see if we can match a detail from the text that would best support that claim. We're going to start with the claim that Antarctica's ice doesn't stop at the edge of the continent. All right, so we have 4 details to choose from. The first one is that the sky is always clear there, and during the winter it's always dark. Next, traveling across the Ross Ice Shelf keeps the journey at the relative warmth of sea level. Third is, when completed, the traverse will be a 1,600-kilometer path of groomed snow and ice marked by green flags. And then finally, thick slabs of floating, slowly shifting ice called ice shelves fringe the continent. All right, so what am I really learning from each detail? Well, this one tells me about basically just setting, that the sky is clear and that it's dark in the winter. That really doesn't show me anything about the ice and the edge of the continent. This is about traveling across the ice shelf and how warm it is compared to other areas of the continent. So that doesn't really show me where the ice stops. This is about temperature. This is talking about the highway that they're going to build. So again, it doesn't really show me where the ice is stopping. But here, this detail uses the word fringing the continent. And that phrase is about the edge of something, and that matches the claim. So for this particular claim, this is going to be the strongest supporting detail. All right, so next, temperatures can get so cold that they cause machinery to malfunction. All right, so this claim is talking about temperature. So which detail matches? The only one that I went through that had anything to do with temperature is this one that talks about how when you travel across a Ross ice shelf, you're at least a little bit relative warmth. So it's a little bit warmer than the rest. And then I remember that in the passage, it was actually the next line where they talk about other areas of the continent they can't actually travel across because it's too cold. And the Ross ice shelf is a little bit warmer. So this is the matching supporting detail for this claim. All right, so I've used these two details. I can eliminate them. Now our third claim, astronomers flock to the South Pole. What detail would prove that astronomers are flocking to the South Pole? Well, why are they flocking to the South Pole? Is it because of the highway? No, that doesn't make sense. They're actually building the highway to make it easier for people to travel across it. But here, the fact that the sky is always clear and it's dark, that is something that an astronomer would love. So this would be a good reason for why astronomers are coming to that continent. So this is my answer. And that means I'm left just with this detail, which would have to support this claim. The Antarctic Highway is one of the most unusual road construction projects ever undertaken. Why is this detail best for that claim? Well, if it's an unusual road construction, my detail is actually talking about how large it is. It's 1,000 miles, which there are highways that are that long, although not very common. But what makes this different is that when I think of a highway, I think about a road with cars on it. And here we're talking about a road with snow and ice marked by green flags. This is not what we typically think of when we think of highways.